Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. An internationally brokered cessation of hostilities in Syria, implemented last Saturday with the backing of both Washington and Moscow, has raised questions regarding the powers' ability to enforce their will on their proxies while maneuvering their focus against Islamic State and other jihadi organizations. To try and understand the dynamic currently residing in Syria, with us in the studio are Dr. Mordechai Kedar, a research fellow at the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies. Welcome.
Nice to be here.
I'd like also to welcome our TV seminar analyst, Mr. Amir Oren, and Dr. Nir Boms, research fellow at the Moshe Dayan Center at Tel Aviv University. Welcome.
Good to be here.
And I'd like to start with a question to you, Mr. Oren. Give us a little bit of an understanding of the situation and how solid is this cessation of hostility, which is actually not an entire ceasefire.
Well, expectations should be grounded in reality. And the reality in Syria right now is that the powers that you mentioned, the United States and Russia, have their own priorities, which have very little to do with what the Syrian people, if one may try to understand what the Syrian people want to do, what the Syrian people wishes. The Americans have one set of priorities, which we will expand on later, the Russians another set, and the cessation of hostilities is only a means towards various ends. And therefore, as long as their policies are being served by the cessation of hostilities, it will be enforced in a way. But once they diverge from each other, we will see the resumption of hostilities.
Dr. Kedar, the cessation of hostilities is not an actual ceasefire, as both the opposition and the Assad regime are continually fighting against the jihadi groups, the U.S. coalition as well. And the Russians have announced on several occasions that they will not stop their attacks either against the Islamic State or the Nusra Front, which is adjacent to the opposition forces. How is this dynamic actually playing out with so many complexities at hand and this cessation of hostility not really bearing actual fruits in the big picture?
Well, we have to remember all the time that the Islamic State and Jabhat al-Nusra, to begin with, were not part of the agreement. They didn't agree on anything. So definitely they are now targeted because they did not enter this ceasefire. But I think that what pushed the superpowers, means the United States and Russia, to this ceasefire was the fear by both that two axes of hostility will meet in Syria and an all-out war will come there. What do I mean? There is the axis between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Iran supports the regime while Saudi Arabia supports the rebels. And another axis is the Turkish-Russia. And Turkey and Russia are at odds for a long time already, especially since the knockdown of this airplane. And the danger that both axes, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Turkey, Russia, will meet one day, and a war which will include local, regional, and global forces will come to Iran, to Syria, and Syria will become a mayhem which nobody knows how to solve. This is why I think at this time, at this point of time, those two powers decided to put an end, or to try to put I would say, interim end to this danger in order to try to calm down the situation, in order not to arrive this meeting of these two axes, which will blow up the whole world.
Dr. Boms, obviously this is one of the big dangers, what we hear from Dr. Kedar, but also what I've initially stated and Mr. Oren has stated after me. This war in Syria is an arena of proxy wars rather than an actual full head-on war with less vague players. Right now we're seeing a test to the power of the United States in Syria on the opposition groups, of its coalition, of actually the power that Moscow implies on the rebels, whether it's the Kurds and other rebels in its control, and the Assad regime, as well as Hezbollah and so on. And then we have another player, Israel, which has also been focusing on Syria not being part of the conflict, but rather has stated clear red lines when it comes to Hezbollah and Iran taking strategic holds within certain areas, moving certain weapons to other locations which might endanger Israel within the constellation of the regional developments. What can you tell us about that?
Well, let's try to separate the two. I mean, first, as you've stated, of course, this is a proxy war, and this also helps us understand why we have two sides in a ceasefire, an American and a Russian. The American side who insists no boots on the ground, the Russians who are actually fighting. And in many ways, it's a win-win for both. Because for the Americans who insist on no boots on the ground, it's much better to argue that when there is a cessation of violence. And for the Russians who are fighting ISIS and on the way bombing whoever else they want, it's also a pretty good because they're negotiated the positions in a much better way for them and for their interests, and certainly for the interests of the regimes. In that case, also, I'm not sure that this is a test for American influence, because the only thing that America did is reinforce the idea, well, we're not going to have boots on the ground. We're even going to give the Turks who were, trying to move forward sort of a halt. You're on your own, perhaps the Saudis as well. And we'll, sit and wait. And we can argue, as Kerry had always argued, no boots on the ground, diplomacy, we're leading from behind and we're able to win. If this is the test for that strategy, then perhaps there is something there. But of course, that doesn't help much the American interest, particularly if they're looking to strengthen the moderate rebels vis-a-vis the radical ones, or vis-a-vis the other axis now with Russia and Iran.
And Israel in the spectrum?
So Israel is now worried again with the growing influence of these, on the one hand, regime, Russia, Iran axis, and these issues have been raising again in a number of statements, and with another visit in Russia today. And the same token, Israel is very much concerned with the fact that the other groups, Jabhat al-Nusra, who is present in the Golan Heights and in the border, and the regime axis is able to continue and gain progress and progressing toward us. None of it, Israel is not a player within the broader context of the ceasefire or the cessation of hostilities. Israel should have an interest to strengthen the moderate groups, but it's not necessarily positioned in a way to do it directly. And when the Americans are saying, well, we're not necessarily going to do it either, and you're going to let the Russians basically take the lead, Israel needs to understand that it's also, like the rebels, have sort of stayed on its own, and perhaps need to continue to speak with some of the other players, the Saudis, who were just concluding...
We'll get back to that point, Mr. Oren.
The Americans have as their top priority the counter-Daesh, counter-ISIL fight. And in that, they see Mosul in Iraq and Raqqa in Syria as the two centers of gravity, and they are isolating the axis between those two cities, and they are methodically going to help the Iraqis take Mosul and then go for Raqqa. So for them, the Syrian situation is, first of all, counter-ISIL, then the humanitarian crisis, because of the migrants and displaced and the pressure on Jordan and the pressure on Europe and all of that. For the Russians, of course, it's the Assad regime. So wherever these interests converge, it's fine. Now, what could happen, and this may sound like science fiction, especially to Mordechai Kedar, but down the road, just like after the Desert Storm Coalition 25 years ago, when the Madrid conference ensued, the Russians may insist that Israel return to the peace negotiations with Syria over the Golan Heights. This right now may look as if it is very distant in the future, but we may get there very soon.
Mordechai Kedar, what's your response?
Look, Russians are saying it time and again. They never recognize the legitimacy of the Israeli occupation, as they say, of the Golan Heights. So
neither did the Americans.
This is nothing new. Yet the question is, okay, whom do you give it to? To the Iranians or to the Jabhat al-Nusra? And this is something which even the Russians understand that Israel cannot do it, especially in these days, when the American power in these days actually became nothing in the Middle East, when the Americans actually gave up on their presence, on the real presence in the Middle East. So Israel definitely has to coordinate its actions in Syria with the Russians. Yet, apparently, and of course, according to foreign media, Israel once in a while does hit targets in Syria when Israel finds those targets are problematic from the Israeli point of view.
When it comes to the coordinated mechanism between Russia and Israel, especially after the cessation of hostilities, which have made this situation a little bit more difficult for Israel if and when it would want to attack in such a situation, considering the organizations that endanger Israel on the one hand, but are part of the cessation of hostilities on the other, how do you think this complexity will actually affect the situation?
Well, don't forget that Israel is not part of the ceasefire. Mm-hmm. Israel was not asked, and Israel did not volunteer to stop whatever Israel, of course, according to foreign media, was doing or is doing in Syria. So definitely Israel, in my view, feels free to act whenever it needs, according to his Israeli interests.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Dr. Bohm.
I'll have to concur with that. Israel stated security red lines. They were very clear. They were made clear. They were made public with the foreign minister, with the prime minister, with the defense minister. And Israel has basically said, if this situation and the chaos in Syria is used to bring weapons, particularly strategic weapons to Hezbollah, Israel will act. If Hezbollah or the regime will get into the border, particularly if and they have done so in at least three different occurrences directly, tackling Israeli forces on the border, Israel will react. It did so over 15 times, and it will reserve the right to do so. The main purpose of the mechanism, the coordination mechanism with the Russians, my read is that it is there to prevent a situation as it happened not so long ago in Turkey. Israel does not wish to fight Russians' planes directly. But Israel would like to make sure that it can continue to protect its own vital interests without getting into a war with Russia. And I think Russia understands that.
Mr. Oren, I would like to take another play and another challenging dynamic in this situation right now. Since the cessation of hostilities actually started, the Islamic State has taken an initiative to target certain northern areas not far from Aleppo and other districts there, targeting primarily also the Kurdish militias, which on the one hand have received backing right now from the US-led coalition, and on the other hand also from Russia in repelling those attacks, something that has put Turkey in a little bit of a paradigm shift where it kind of needs to maneuver between a cessation of hostilities, which it is bound under, but at the same time raising concerns, being very worried about a Kurdish presence on the border, which might endanger the situation there for Turkish interests, as it has stated in the past. How do you see that?
Well, for that very reason, the Americans are emphasizing the special forces aspect. You would note that General Joseph Votel, the head of the Special Operations Command, was just appointed the head of CENTCOM, the Central Command. And to replace him, the commanding general of JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command, which is the elite commander formation of the U.S. Armed Forces, General Raymond Tony Thomas, was appointed SOCOM head. General Thomas, along with other officials, visited Kobani and other places in the region that you just mentioned a few weeks ago in order to coordinate this very problem so that the Kurdish militias fight ISIS or ISIL without infringing on Turkish sovereignty.
Nonetheless, Kurdish gains infringe on Turkish sovereignty in any case, as the Turks have informed the international coalition.
It is a very explosive issue because the Turks would probably want to have a 10-kilometer or 10-mile security zone along the border, but then the Kurds might get rockets, just like Hamas and others did, or Hezbollah in Lebanon, and start shooting over the border. So the American task is to separate the two.
Dr. Kedar, I saw you shaking your head in acquiescence. How do you perceive this?
No, what happens is that Turkey, for a long time, cooperated with the Islamic State. They bought the oil from them. They enabled vehicles with machine guns to go into Turkey in order to circumvent all kinds of dangerous areas in Syria, coming back to Aleppo, to Bab el-Hawa, course from Syria, from Turkey to Syria. Definitely, Turkey was in bed with the Islamic State for years. And you know what? I think that the fact that the Islamic State is still
An allegation they reject on the one hand,
Sure,
and
they reject.
the Russians and Defense Minister Yalon at some point have referred to that. Nonetheless, also the United States and the NATO member states that support Turkey reject to a certain degree, of course.
How many jihadists from foreign countries, from Israel as well, from the United States, from Europe, came to Turkey, to resorts and went to Syria, to the jihad fields. Turkey was the gateway for thousands of those. Turkey was cooperating with the Islamic State for a long time. And now Turkey has to make a better face in the world because, the world is pressing and all this. So this is the Turkish game. I don't buy it. The Turks do what is good for the Turks and not for what is good for any coalition or Americans or any others, including NATO.
Dr. Boms?
Well, all of this probably helps the prediction that this is going to be yet another round. And we'll have a chance to speak about this again after the cessation of violence will emerge again as another round of violence. You still have not sorted out the fundamental issues. But I think if you're looking at who is actually winning here, this is still becoming a little clearer. Russia has been the winner, certainly in the last 6 months. They've sat down very quietly, waiting for the Iran deal, moved it in September.
I'd like to touch on the Russians in a few, but more specifically on the Kurdish dilemma when it comes to the Turkish dilemma when it comes to Kurdish gains in the face of ISIL's advance on the northern border, the various demands by Ankara on the matter, and on the other hand, the challenges the cessation of hostility is facing as such.
Well, the Kurdish card is also not a card in unison. You have the PYD, which is the more significant military force, but also in the one that Turkey is afraid more from, and also the one that the Americans are somewhat ambivalent about. And you have the other piece, which the moderate groups that are more connected to the KRG in Iraq, but they have much less support. And are not in position to have so many gains. One of the messages that this particular move on the ceasefire gave to Turkey by the United States was, this is not the time. This is actually serves the idea of separating the powers, because we're now in trying to hold the fire. And therefore, if you're planning to have a big move into Syria, which can further escalate issues and in a way deflate from the war against ISIS, this is not the time to do it, you're on your own. And this is part of the message that was given to Turkey with this particular move of the cessation of violence.
By the way, not all action is above ground. And this has nothing to do with the Kurds. But some of the American actions against ISIS are cyber attacks. And this is a new form of warfare. They are acting against banks, against command and control. They are disrupting some of the activity. And if this is going to bring gains, we will see a major shift in warfare.
I'd like also to touch on the Saudi-Turkish alliance, which was about to get formed, some maneuvering together, which happened. And at the same time, as Dr. Bums stated earlier, there was some kind of rejection by the United States where it said, no, you're on your own. We're going to see how things are going according to our interests rather than yours. How do Turkey actually view the circumstances with their strategic interest in the matter? And at the same time, also Saudi Arabia, which has moved some troops, certain indicators claim more masses of troops than others. But at the same time, it is more a statement rather than an actual military maneuver. How do you see that?
Two riddles here. One is the Saudi decision-making process. Who is calling the shots in Riyadh? We are not really sure. We see some results of some processes, but we're not sure. And the other one is Erdogan. Erdogan is trying so many maneuvers which are only half-hearted vis-a-vis Israel, for instance. He is willing to compromise. He is willing to be appeased. He's not appeasing, but he's willing to be appeased. But he doesn't go the last mile regarding the Israeli demand that the Hamas operatives are booted out of Turkey. So one can hardly say what the policy is. There are signs, there are omens, but nothing as of now.
Dr. Kedar.
Turkey here, I think, is facing a big problem, first of all, on the economic issue, because today the markets in Europe are not as they were years ago. Turkey now tries to find ways how to get some gas from Israel. Don't forget that they depend on the gas which comes from Russia. And they are not sure that the Russians will give them gas in the future. So all in all, definitely Turkey now turns to be, I feel, more friendly to Israel, not because they love us, but they see what happens to them from the north. And in this equation between Israel being hostile or being hostile to Israel on one side and being with the tension with the Russians, definitely they prefer to be more with the Mediterranean basin rather than being with the Black Sea basin.
And how about Saudi Arabia, the dynamic there? How are they currently coordinating on the matter of Syria, an action that was perceived by certain security officials as a move of desperations rather than a move of actual strategy?
Look, the Saudis today have a very complex situation as they see it. First of all, Iran with the money, which comes from the world. This is worrying very much the Saudis, because now this money will go to Yemen to continue the war against the government, which is supported by the Saudis. Second thing, they see what happens in Lebanon. And Lebanon actually was supported by Saudi Arabia, but Lebanon becomes something which under the hands of the Hezbollah, who are fighting the people in Syria who are supported by Saudi Arabia. And the last thing is the Saudi economy. There is a limit to what they can finance, how they can lower the prices of oil, as they did it in order to undermine the economy of Iran, and maybe to give the Americans also some kind of punishment because of what America is doing by this deal with Iran. But there is a limit to what the Saudis can pull the money because they are running out from their resources. And they cannot play this game for much longer time.
By the way, you would recall that there was a foreign ministry, Israeli foreign ministry delegation, which went to Moscow a couple of weeks ago to meet with Sergei Lavrov and others, and immediately leaked that the Russians are displeased with the Turkish-Israeli rapprochement. So the Russians are following very closely what Israel does, what Turkey does, and when it has a certain position on it, they make it known.
That's very interesting, Dr. Boms.
And let's get back to the departure point of all of this. When Erdogan began this chapter of policy with the idea of a neighborhood friendship policy, he wanted to make sure that he would be a power broker in the Middle East. He tried, he failed miserably, and he in some ways tried to amend some of these ideas, realizing that alliances have been shifting. Russia has been playing a very successful game in doing the same. It played the game very quietly until the Iran deal, and then bursted after some of the sides were already exhausted in order to make some very significant gains, particularly on the Syrian front. The Saudis now understand that since the Americans are not really acting, since the Turkish card is not always clear, somebody needs to be assertive here and somebody needs to confront the Russians. That's why we've heard from Adel Jubeir, the Saudi chief spokesperson and foreign minister, that they are ready. They're considering ideas of ground insertion. You still hear more plans about a safe zone in the north or in the south, and certainly about a potential Saudi move. Saudis still have time before they're going to be depleted with their resources, and they're motivated and understand that if they're not going to act and take the lead, they're not sure if anyone else except the Russians will. Therefore, there's probably still a chance of a certain move by the Saudis, and that will again change some of the cards on the table.
You know, Dr.
I'd
Bones-
like first of all to ask you with regarding to there's been a lot of talk about the United States' inability to keep their power in the region, the power vacuum, which has actually caused certain of those situations to emerge. How do you see the brokerage by the United States, the leading component of this cessation of hostilities, actually a statement? Is this a statement?
Yes, it is. Dr. Boms used the term exhausted. And it is very true that the local players in the Syrian drama have exhausted their power. Without outside support, neither the opposition nor Assad can prevail. And therefore, they have to obey what the Americans on the one side and the Russians on the other side are telling them. Now, it's very interesting that the Americans and the Russians are becoming rivals on the global scale, or at least in the European theater, but they are partners here. This is almost the opposite of what happened during the Cold War, when they were really partners in detente, but rivals regionally. And they are going to dictate to the players inside Syria the partition or the shape of the political settlement.
We're running out of time. One sentence response on the matter, and if you will, also give us a short sentence too about how do you view the circumstances evolving?
The ceasefire in Syria will continue only as long as the parties need the time to recuperate, to breathe. After 5 years of constant fighting, they have to refill their ammunition, to fix weapons, to make their positions better in order to be better prepared for the next round. So as long as they need this time to prepare themselves, the ceasefire will continue. It will finish when one side will decide it's time to continue.
Dr. Boms, 2 sentences from you on the matter?
So the 2 sentences are really about the humanitarian dimension. Let's put geopolitics aside for a second and remember, we just had, just a couple of weeks ago, updated numbers finally. Over 500 people have lost, 500,000 people lost their lives in the last 5 years. Over 13 million refugees, and more and more and more, even now in the days of these ceasefires, so the average death rate have moved from 250 to 50. There's very long way ahead still.
This local humanitarian issue is also on a global scale. Mr. Oren, last sentence
No one
from
is
you.
going to have a decisive victory. It will be a tie, a draw of sorts, with perhaps Assad winning by points, thanks to Putin.
Well, that is indeed a sentence of decisive information. Thank you so very much, Dr.
Syria doesn't
Keidal.
exist anymore as a state.
Well, that
divided.
doesn't seem that way indeed. Dr. Keidal, thank you so very much for being here. Mr. Amir Oren, thank you. I'd like also to thank Dr. Boms for being here. Thank you so very much. I'd like also to thank our viewers, and we will see you next week. You just watched Jerusalem Studio. If you were enriched by the program, please consider supporting Heaven TV7 Jerusalem. Call us at 0600 10077 or send your donation using the bank account reference number on the screen. You can also donate via PayPal. Jerusalem Studio is made possible by your donation.